Welcome. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here with us once again. If you've been with us all month, my name is Jeremiah Aha. I'm a part of the team here at Wellness Together School Mental Health, and we're so glad you're here. I think there are still people kind of virtually finding their seats. So we're so glad you're here with us to spend the next, hopefully, couple of hours with us this afternoon. And on behalf of the California Department of Education, as well as our team here at Wellness Together, thank you for the work that you have been doing and that you continue to do even amidst all the recent and ongoing challenges. I'm going to share my screen and share a few important links for you. And if this is the first webinar of the month that you've been a part of in this Supporting You, Supporting Students series, I want to say welcome. We're glad that you're here. And if you've been 2, 3, or this is your 4th time here with us, thank you so much for being a part of it. We've had tremendous feedback. Thousands of people have registered. And yes, this is being recorded. That's probably the most frequently asked question. This is being recorded. If you have colleagues that weren't able to make it, or if you need to leave halfway through, we will post this on our YouTube channel. But again, thank you. And we'll go ahead and jump in. We have some great things in store for all of us here on part 4 of Supporting You, Supporting Students webinar. I'm going to share my screen here again. And I go over 4 important links. And for those of you that have been here multiple times throughout this month, this is definitely a rerun for you. But there could be some of those that are here for the first time. So I'll just share these links, these links for you. First link is this, and that is to our resource folder. So for the past 3 Thursdays, and including today, we've had presenters join us and they've shared their presentations, supplemental materials, and valuable links for you. And you can access all of that even right now at bit.ly/supporting you, supporting students. And that's an open link, and you'll see a brand new folder in there for Dr. Stephen Brock, who is our main presenter today. We're so glad to have him. So again, bit.ly/ and then just the name of the webinar series, Supporting You, Supporting Students. So you might want to bookmark that, make it a favorite, put it on another browser or device that you might have nearby, be able to access that. There's already some great resources in there for Dr. Brock's presentation, so make sure to take a peek. The next link for you is to submit feedback. And we here at Wellness Together, along with the California Department of Education, want to make this a very valuable and helpful time for you personally, as well as to equip you and to empower you to continue supporting students and families. So please visit wellnesstogether.org/feedback. That is a place to tell us how we're doing for these events, as well as answering some questions on what are some of your biggest needs? What are some of the ways that we can be more helpful for you? So visit that link for that. And today also, Dr. Brock at the end of his presentation is going to allow for some live Q&A with you as attendees. So if you'd like to submit a question, the best way to do that for our team behind the scenes, there's about 8 of them behind the scenes doing any kind of troubleshooting and helping you along the way, go to bit.ly/SYSS2020. That's to ask any questions for both Monica Nepomuceno, who I'm about to introduce here, and Dr. Stephen Brock, as well as Marlon Morgan. You can put that in bit.ly/SYSS2020. And finally, all these recordings you'll find in our YouTube channel. You can subscribe. That's the best way and the fastest way, rather, to get our videos, or you can go to our website, wellnesstogether.org/events. Okay, I'll jump in and I'll go over this again later on in the webinar today, because there could be some that joined with us late, but no shame. I'm sure there's plenty of things that you're juggling. Again, thank you that you're here with us. And now I'll turn it over to Monica Nepomuceno with the California Department of Education. Monica, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent.
Can you see me?
We cannot.
I think you guys turned my camera off. That's fine. Not a big deal.
Turn it on right now. There we go.
Okay.
Just sent you a request.
Start my video. There we go.
There we go.
So hello everyone, and good afternoon again. And On behalf of the California Department of Education, I just want to again welcome you to our fourth and hopefully not our final webinar. There's still so much to address, and we've been hearing about different requests from everyone, so we hope to bring these to you, maybe not on a weekly basis, but hope to see you again and give you the information that you're requesting. So again, I'm going to reiterate what Jeremiah said, just sending you a great big thank you for what you're currently doing. You're working harder than ever before in these extraordinary times. And so my respect to you, because you continue to push through and persevere through all of the continued challenges, right? I'm just going to take a minute to be real and transparent with you and let you know that I'm tired. I'm really tired. These past few weeks have been filled with so much work and requests that are coming in left and right, and being the super overachiever that I am, I'm always going nonstop, and it's becoming increasingly difficult as the days go by and the challenges get bigger and the needs get bigger. I usually set, impossible expectations of myself. And so I haven't really been modeling the self-care that I normally advocate. I rarely tell people no when they ask me to produce something or help them out with something. And then I feel either, really disappointed when I don't meet those expectations or the deadlines, or I drive myself to exhaustion because I'm working 14 or 16-hour days. I know, pretty ridiculous. And I know that many of you can relate because you too are putting in many more hours. And let's be honest, a lot of those hours, at least for me, is spent on navigating all of the technology that we're not accustomed to. We don't have time for stories, but boy, do I have them, right? And so last night was a prime example of a 14-hour day. And I finally, at 11:30, I closed my computer and I said, that's it. I wasn't finished with my project, but I was done. And so I gave myself permission to rest and forgave myself for not finishing the project, right? So I'm asking that you too give yourself permission to rest and to take breaks so that you can recharge. And if in the midst of all this you need to take a day off, by all means, that is your self-care, right? After being in this, 6 to 8 weeks into sheltering in place, there's a lot more questions today than there were maybe a month or so ago when we started this shelter in place. And although we want some, concrete answers, let us know when school's gonna resume, let us know when we can go out there, because we want answers. We want to be able to plan. We have to also accept that there are a lot of things that are still unknown. And even when we get those answers that we're seeking so much, it might not be the final answers, right? We're all dealing with this the best that we can, and we're all trying to figure out the best and the worst case scenarios. So with that, I want to again ask you to be kind and gentle with others, because this was thrust upon everyone. Nobody was prepared. So let's give our leaders, a chance to flush through some of this and give them grace and credit for all that they're doing and all that you are doing, right? We're going to have those days when, we're not that productive. So be gentle with yourself, right? One of the things that we need to think about is the expectations, our own expectations, and those expectations of others, that we need to be available and 100% because we're at home, right? There's no excuses. You're not out. So we can't say we're late because of traffic or anything like that, right? Or I have another meeting, because people know you don't have another meeting. But the reality is that, we're not going to be at our best and at our 100%. And our colleagues are also not going to be at their best or 100% all the time. And that's okay. We need to communicate that that's okay. So last week, if you joined us, I spoke a little bit about taking advantage of this opportunity to change the way we do our usual business, right? And to change the way that we serve our students. And I hope that if you joined us last time, that you've been able to give it some thought. I'm going to this week request that you think of more creative or unorthodox ways to change the business as usual, because we know that that business as usual was not working, right? So I'd like for you guys to take some time to reflect on what made you choose this career path, whether you're a teacher, a mental health professional, administrator, school board member, community provider, or any other youth serving position. Think about the difference that you wanted to make when you selected this and when you first started, right? The difference that you wanted to make in students' lives. And think about the hope that you felt, the dream that you had, that you were going to have a positive impact on students. Remember that vision that you had? The creative ideas and the unconventional thinking. And then somewhere along the line, it stopped because of our normal, because you were told that you couldn't do that or you had to do it a different way. And that somewhere you lost your umph, your fire, and even your spirit. And suddenly you found yourself sort of on autopilot, just going through the motions. So I'd like for you to take some time this week or the next to really reflect and imagine a system of support for our students, for staff, and for parents. And what does that look like? Jot down some notes, some ideas, and feel free to let us know. Send them to wellness@cde.ca.gov, and we'll provide that in the bit.ly. But really what I'm doing is asking you to reach deep down inside of you to pull that authentic self, that messy, sort of awkward, perfectly imperfect human being that you are, and move forward from this point, right? Expand the realms of your positions. Make yourself more visible on campus and to the students. That's why we're all here. Take the crazy chance and present your ideas to your administrators, even if they're way out there and far-fetched. That's the only way we're going to make changes that we need. And for any administrators or leadership folks that we have who are joining us today, please take the time to listen to your staff and their ideas. Give them the space to be creative and to start new activities to engage students in a different way, in a better way. And speaking of students, you know, we've just seen recent data that there's been a 25% decrease in CPS report. And while that should be a good thing and we should be celebrating, we know that it's not because the abuse has stopped. It's because it's not being reported, because the students aren't in school and they're not having those close relationships, and we're not seeing this happen. So despite the fact that we're, you know, physically distanced from our students and from each other, it's really critical that we seek ways to connect with our students to ensure they're safe and continue our role as mandated reporters. That is something that is connected to the check-in information that we talked about last week, as well as the presentation that was done by Dr. Sue Coates and Tom Sops. So, you know, just sort of to close, I know that many of you are worried about the governor's message yesterday about resuming schools in July. And I just want to tell you, please don't worry, please. The governor was sharing his hope to resume learning in the quote unquote normal context. And he was being a visionary. Our state superintendent, Tony Thurman, released a statement that says, right now, we don't know exactly when school can start, and we will not ask for schools to start until it is safe for everyone to come back to our campuses. We will work with our public health officers to make sure the timeline is one that allows for safety. We will not budge from that question. So one thing that we have to remember is that the decision of when to start school is made at the local level, not at the state level. There was also a question last week about receiving guidance from the CDE to help you prepare for the reopening of schools. And I know you're wanting that information now, but I want you to also take a step backwards and let's let that play out just a little bit. Give the leadership some time to flush it out again. And let's not jump and make rash decisions or, jump into something that we're not prepared to do. We will have guidance for you, but I think right now we're in the middle of distance learning. And if we take our focus away from that, then we are not giving due diligence to what we've been working on thus far. So if you have any suggestions, we'd like to hear from you, any ideas about preparing for the startup, just share them with me again at wellness@cde.ca.gov. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll hand it over to Jeremiah.
Monica, thank you very much. Appreciate not only your encouragement for all of us, as I think it resonates with quite a few of us, especially we can't really blame traffic as an excuse for showing up late to a meeting anymore. But also
I tried.
Yes, but also for your invitation just to allow the California Department of Education to come alongside anyone that's listening really to help. And that link to that email, wellness@cde.ca.gov, is in the important links there at that bit.ly. And I'll share that here on our important links page. There's been quite a few that have joined just in the past 5 minutes or so. So welcome, we're glad you're here to part 4 of Supporting You, Supporting Students. These are 4 important links throughout our time today. You can access all the resources, the presentations, and supplemental materials for you at the top link, bit.ly/supporting you, supporting students. You can provide feedback and let us know how we can best support you at wellnesstogether.org/feedback. And Dr. Brock, as well as Monica, and us here at Wellness Together will be participating in a Q&A time at the end. So if you have a question you'd like to submit for any of those panelists, do so at bit.ly/SYSS2020. This webinar, as well as the last 3 in this series, are being recorded. You'll find the last 3 at our YouTube channel. We've had quite a few that have subscribed in the past week, so I encourage you to do so. It's the fastest way to get the latest videos to you, or you can go to our website at wellnesstogether.org/events. Before we continue, just want to say thank you to our partners to help make this entire month happen. And this is quite the list, but I'll just read them because they definitely deserve the recognition just for coming together to continue to wave the flag of student and educator mental health, especially at a time right now. That's the California Department of Education, the Office of the California Surgeon General, Blue Shield of California, the National Center for School Mental Health, Stanford University and Stanford Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing, the USC Suzanne Dvorak Peck School of Social Work, California Association of School Counselors, Pacific Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or our favorite acronym, MHTTC, California Association of School Psychologists, the Children's Partnership, San Joaquin Child Abuse Prevention Council, and today especially California State University at Sacramento. Stingers up for Sac State. Proud to have Dr. Brock here with us. And most importantly, you. Thank you for your partnership in this work. And so we have a survey. And Marlon, I'll ask if you can launch that survey for us. And just want to get a good sense of who all is here, not only just for all of us to see that, hey, maybe we're not alone in the role that we have on a day-to-day. And so our question as we begin is, what is the best description of your main role in supporting students and families? So if you would take a moment, just click the most appropriate spot on there: educator, site or district administrator, district employed mental health professional, county employed mental health professional, school or district nurse, policy setter, and that includes at the school board level, at the county, at state assembly, any of those that are involved in making those kinds of legislative decisions, support staff, and I believe 2 others I can't see here on my screen, but a community-based organization employed mental health professional, as well as state employed as well, advancing the cause for student mental health. So just take a moment and pick which best describes you and your role. we can all kind of take a look. We'll wait just another moment before Marlon, our founder and executive director at Wellness Together School Mental Health, shares just a little bit with us. An engaging exercise I think will be good for all of us. Okay, so looks like about over a third of us here are district employed mental health professionals. And looks like the next would be support staff and then educator. And again, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't quite. Marlon, how about I turn it over to you and you can maybe share a few of the things that maybe I'm not seeing there. Again, Marlon Morgan's our founder and executive director here at Wellness Together. Marlon, thanks for being here. And if you wouldn't mind sharing some things, if I missed some categories there at the bottom.
No problem. Thank you, Jeremiah, for opening us up there, giving us everything we need to be successful. I think it's good to reflect on who's here with us. We're constantly trying to find ways to engage on online. We're all still getting used to talking to our computers and not getting any direct feedback, but wanting to make sure we provide an experience for all of you that is helpful. So it does look like we're topping out with most of us are district employed mental health professionals. I think that's really important, and I think will be helpful to continue to inform the services we provide for all of you. And it's just helpful to see for all of us to know who's on here with us. So we will stop sharing that. We do want to make sure everyone can see that. We'll stop sharing that. We'll take a poll a little bit later today, so keep us engaged. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll be able to see that there. Let's make sure that looks the way it needs to. Let me, 1 second here. Having just a bit of a technical difficulty. We can't really blame traffic anymore, but we can still blame technical difficulties. So that's always helpful. 1 second here.
I can launch mine if you'd like, Marlon. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Let me try one more time.
Sure.
And try to share these slides as keynote here.
There we go.
Right. Okay. So if I push play, how does that look?
It's actually showing the preview slide next.
Okay.
I've had, I'm familiar with the.
We'll flip the two. How about now?
There we go.
Awesome. Thank you for your patience. And we'll just do a little bit of a check-in. Last week, we discussed some of the factors that we've seen impacting our mental health, our students' mental health, and even as we look into our family and we see how our family interactions have changed. And we talked about the 5 S's. We even added a 6th S. A lot of these come from, I want to give credit to Dr. Jean Twenge. I once pronounced it Twenge and I was politely corrected. It is Dr. Jean Twenge. She's a brilliant researcher and has done a meta-analysis on a lot of the longitudinal research when it comes to generational mental health and the factors that impact that. And so what we're seeing across the state and in the classroom and at home with our students are these factors that are really having an impact on our students' mental health. The first is sleeplessness. We're going to go through these because it's a review from last week. We're going to go through these pretty quickly. The second, we're seeing more screen time over authentic or in-person communication. We're seeing a solitary and sedentary lifestyle increase, self-medication as well. And finally, that 6th S, social distancing, which can often contribute to more social isolation, which we know is not good for our mental health. So we want to know, how can we respond? And is there any better way to respond to an alliteration of unhelpful factors than an alliteration of helpful factors? I don't think there's a better way. So we will quickly check in with ourselves today Dr. Brock, we're excited to have Dr. Brock here, and he's going to be walking us through some framework to really continue to support our students and families in our schools. But before we get started, we wanted to do a quick check-in with ourselves, because we promised you, so this is supporting you, supporting students. So this is the supporting you part. We're hoping to do a good job of focusing on us first. And we're going to look at the first R. You know, we have this opportunity right now, and as we slowly find hope and come out of this crisis that we're still in, a lot of us, I would say many of us, are going to have the opportunity to grow in adversity. And as we do that, these 3 R's are just simply reminders, things that we can do as we continue to emerge from this crisis together. And, you know, hopefully we've grown, we've changed a little bit, and we've had to adapt, and we've gotten some new coping skills. And it's just, this is just a reminder to help us organize that and put some words to it. So first, we want to consider really recognizing our thought patterns and behaviors. Sometimes our behaviors are coping skills, and I think I mentioned last time that my favorite coping skill, for better or for worse, is often Haagen-Dazs chocolate peanut butter. But you know, we all have our own, and we want to make sure we're focusing on using those healthy coping skills that are going to be helpful for us in the long run and in the short run. And so we also want to spend some time to reflect. I think it was Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, that first said, "What we resist persists." And we know that to be true, that when we're spending our time and effort resisting what we would like to have happen, or problems in our lives, and not reflecting, that's often contributes to more stress. So we want to make sure we're taking the time to reflect rather than avoid, as we're being asked to, many of us are being asked to be a homeschool teacher, a person that is caring for other members of the family if and when they become ill. We're often, and then we're also having to do all that at the same time as our job. And like Monica said, we don't even have the natural breaks and transitions in our job that we used to have with those rhythms. And so this can be really stressful. So we need to take the time to reflect rather than avoid. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, our conference, the California Student Mental Wellness Conference in September. We're planning to have Dr. Stephen C. Hayes there. He's one of the developers of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, or ACT. And we love ACT, and we are always trying to work it in and help. You know, even when I had a private practice back years ago, I would always start with what we're going to do today, which is a values sort. It's reconnecting with our values. So in order to do this, we're going to kind of consider 2 things, and we're going to take 2 polls. The first is going to really ask us to recognize what our life currently looks like, how we spend our time, focus our efforts. We're going to take a moment to briefly reflect on that. And then in the second part of today's activity, we're going to try to reconnect with what we would like that to look like. So I'm going to launch this first poll, and I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how Dr. Hayes talks about our values, and an analogy that's always been helpful for me. So we're going to launch this poll here. All right, you should have that poll up on your screen. So what I'm going to ask you to do is look through all 10 of these areas, which are all things, they may not include all of your values, but they're all things that represent the way we spend our time and effort in our life. And what I'd like to do is choose 3 of those. And I want you to remember the 3 that you chose, maybe write it down somewhere, because the poll is great for us to see where everyone is, and it is anonymous, and to get some validation there. But also it's really important that you write down your own, because they're going to be different for everyone. Thanks. I can see lots of people voting. That's great. So I'm going to give a few more seconds, and while you're voting, I'm going to tell you the analogy that Stephen C. Hayes often uses about values, and that is that imagine that each of us are bus drivers, kind of driving our own life. And the values we have on the bus, we have many, many values on our bus. And every once in a while, if we're not paying attention, we start to let some things sit up front with us while we drive the bus that aren't always very helpful. And when we do that, and when we don't recognize, reflect, and reconnect with what's important to us, it starts to create stress in our lives. And by just reflecting on that, and then reconnecting with how we spend our time and our efforts and our focus, can really alleviate some stress, because we want to bring the two into balance with each other. So we're going to take a look now, just a couple more seconds to vote, and see kind of where all these values are sitting on the bus currently. And then we're going to take a look at sort of where we'd like them to be. And Jeremiah is going to do some magic in the background where he's going to make a slide of these results in real time. He's excellent at that, so we'll let him do that. So getting ready to end the poll here. Thank you for voting. Most of us have participated at this point. And what we have results, a clear winner here for how we focus our time and effort, and sometimes that's what's necessary. And obviously we need to work, and that's important to all of us. And this is not a time to shame or blame anyone for putting values or importance on values for working. Obviously, a lot of us work because we want to support our other values and our people in our lives. And so, but we do want to make sure that we're considering what kind of balance we have. So what we're seeing here in these results really is that career and employment is by far the top value. I didn't expect this, but I guess it makes sense since we're all in education, but only 7% of us chose finances. I think that's interesting. So I don't know how we'll reflect on that later. But, and it looks like maybe parenting, personal education and growth, which makes sense as a group of mainly educators and therapists, and then also mental health, physical health, immediate family relationships. So I'm going to stop sharing those results. I'm hoping Jeremiah got the top 3. And we're going to take one more poll. So that one is just a little bit different. And that is, where would we like to be? What's the best case scenario? How can we bring into balance the values that we share and hold? What would we like our top 3? If someone made a documentary of our life, or they got onto our bus, who would they see sitting up front if it's exactly who we want sitting up front? And we'll see what the top 3 are there. I'm already able to see some real-time results. This is great. Many people are voting right now. So just consider, I want you to picture you're a bus driver. Who's sitting up there with you? Is it parenting, spirituality, friendships, marriage and intimate relationships? Is it finances? Is it recreation and hobbies? This is a great time. This is a never done a value sort with thousands of people before, but it's kind of fun to see kind of where you are, where you fit in, and to consider how other people value different things and where we're all at with our balance by taking this time. So just about another 10 seconds here, and then we will share the results. We're almost up over 3/4 of folks voting. Thank you for continuing to participate. It's great participation today. And I'm going to get ready to end the poll here. Thank you for those last minute votes. And we're going to see ending it, and we're going to share the results in real time. Wow. Wow. Okay. So if you remember the first one, I believe career and employment was number 1. Here, it looks like mental and physical health. So those two things, if we look at it as a group, need to come into balance. And we probably need to spend a little more time and effort, or probably have the opportunity to spend a little more time and effort focused on growing our mental and physical health. I think that marriage and intimate relationships also is right up there. I think that was quite a bit lower in how we actually spend our time. And finances didn't change much at all. It's actually 6%. So about 1% of us wish we spent less time on our finances and less focus on that. So, wow, that's great. Jeremiah, I'm gonna go to that next slide, and that will be amazing. If you have done all that in the background, we'll see. And
We sure will.
wow, okay, sounds confident.
Well, getting ready to blame tech if it doesn't.
Okay, well, that worked for me earlier, I think so. Okay, I'm gonna close that down and move on to the next slide here. All right, so it doesn't look like it populated on mine.
I can share mine if you'd like.
Okay, yes, go ahead, that would be great. Wow.
Could you pull those back up? I think
Yeah.
I think my confidence, pride comes before the fall, I think.
Yeah. I think that looks right to me, Jay.
I think the second one was marriage and intimate relationships, I believe. I had copied and pasted.
Okay, thanks. All right, real time. You're all witnessing this in real time. We get to see kind of how we each did as a group. And it looks like career was certainly ahead more than we'd like it to be. It doesn't look like it even made the top 3 as far as how we'd like to spend our time or focus our efforts. And so, you know, obviously there are realities to this, that we need to work and make money and provide, but at the same time, there is a lot of value to recognizing, taking the time to recognize the parts of our lives that may be out of balance from what we would like, reflect on how we would like it to look, and to really reconnect with how we feel and what we value most. And so this has been great to spend this time with all of you. I think it's always important to just take some time out and look at this. I look forward to coming out of this with all of you, doing more webinars in the future, and the conference in September, and to reunite as changed people that have gone through a really challenging time together, but have stuck together, continued serving our students and families, and done what we needed to do in personal growth as well. So with that, I'll read Dr. Brock's wonderful bio here as we get ready to hear from him. Dr. Stephen Brock is a professor and school psychology program coordinator at the California State University, Sacramento, CSUS. He previously served as the president of both the California Association of School Psychologists and the National Association of School Psychologists. Before joining the faculty at CSUS, Dr. Brock was the lead school psychologist for the Lodi Unified School District, where he worked for 18 years. He is the author of numerous crisis-related publications, including the lead editor of Best Practices in School Crisis Prevention and Intervention, lead author of School Crisis Prevention and Intervention, the Prepare Model, and is the co-author in Identifying and Assessing and Treating PTSD at School. And obviously we can see how this is going to connect with our work, not only now, but in the fall when our students come back. Hopefully we're able to get together with them, and we're going to need to care for them and continue to care for ourselves. So with that, please welcome Dr. Stephen Brock.
Thank you, Marlon. It is great to be with everybody here today. Let me quickly share my screen and go ahead and get started. Again, thank you to Marlon and Jeremiah, as well as the entire Wellness Together staff, for all of your hard work in getting this session set up, and special thanks to Monica and CDE for their attention to school mental health. Before I get started here today, I would like to just do some little logistical kinds of arrangements. First, I'm finding screen time to be really fatiguing. So I have asked that we take a really quick break from staring at a screen in about 20 minutes or so. It'll be a quick 5-minute break, but shortly after 2 o'clock, you can anticipate a real quick break where you can stretch and get a glass of water, a snack, whatever, but please don't look at a screen. No email during this quick break. You're defeating the whole purpose of why I'm wanting us to have a quick break. Also, Marlon and Jeremiah mentioned the folder with my name on it. That includes the PowerPoint that I'll be sharing with you here today in PowerPoint handout form, a document supporting the topic's application to the current crisis, COVID-19, as well as some supplementary resources that I just thought you might find interesting. I really appreciate the chance to share with all of you today a framework for school crisis preparedness developed by educators for K-12 educators. Prepare, the Prepare curriculum, now in its 3rd edition, is an empirically informed approach to comprehensive school safety and crisis preparedness. It includes a 1-day workshop focused on school safety, which we conveniently refer to as Workshop 1, and a 2-day workshop, which we refer to as Workshop 2, which is focused on mental health crisis intervention. Nationally, as of last May, so the statistics I'm about to give you are a bit of an underestimate, over 15,000 individuals had completed Workshop 1, and 20,000, just short of 20,000 people had completed Workshop 2. I'll be providing more information on this curriculum at the end of my presentation. For now, and in the next 60 minutes or so, I want to focus this webinar specifically on the crisis intervention aspect of the curriculum. More specifically, here are my workshop goals. First, from this session, I hope that you will understand the word crisis, be able to better understand the traumatic potential of a given crisis event, appreciate how crises affect schools, and the need for comprehensive school safety and crisis preparedness. We need to be active not just during a crisis, but before and after crises in order to better meet the needs of our students. And fifth and finally, I hope this session will begin to help you to be able to better assess traumatic impact and respond to student needs. Let's begin by making sure we have a common understanding of what the term crisis means. First, as listed on this slide, crises are events that are painful. They either generate physical or emotional pain, or are viewed by individuals as having the potential to do such. Also, these are events that we cannot completely control nor completely predict. Now, it's important to mention that the characteristics number 2 and 3 in my list exist on a continuum. To the extent there are things we can do to mitigate the potential for physical or emotional pain, the event becomes less traumatic. Similarly, to the extent we can predict the course of a stressor, the event becomes less traumatic. Finally, it's important to acknowledge that individual perceptions of the event are critical. They're essential in determining whether or not, for a particular student, an event is viewed as a crisis or not. This slide lists, in order, from least to most traumatic, general classifications or types of crisis events. Generally speaking, what serves to make items more or less traumatic is the fact that when something is caused by people and it's an intentional event, it's going to be more stressful, more traumatic. Conversely, those events caused by nature or that are accidental are going to be less traumatic. However, even as we look towards the bottom of that list with naturally caused deaths or natural disasters or significant accidents, it is important to acknowledge that if they interact with a certain set of circumstances, they too can become highly traumatic. And here, as you will see, there's some reason to be concerned about the traumatic potential of COVID-19. According to the PREPARE model, the devastation of a particular crisis event is the result of the event's interactions with the event's predictability, consequences, duration, and intensity. Now, when applied to the current COVID-19 set of stressors, I would suggest that while the event can, to a certain extent, be predicted, we kind of know what we have in front of us, and we have a basic idea of the course we're going to follow. It's not perfect, but we kind of know what's going to happen next. This will lessen traumatic impact. So it's not so much that COVID-19, at least as it's currently evolving, is completely unpredictable that makes it more traumatic. But when we think about some of the consequences of COVID-19, which can include severe illness, hospitalization, and tragically, in some cases, death, the event, particularly when fatalities are involved, can be quite devastating for individual students and staff members. In terms of duration, of course, this is a unique feature of the COVID-19 situation. We are now several weeks into this, and we are still anticipating the stressor that is COVID-19 being a clear and present danger for a period of time. That's going to increase its potential to generate traumatic levels of stress. And finally, we need to factor in the intensity of trauma exposure and the trauma experience. In other words, we need to ask, how are our students actually perceiving or experiencing COVID-19? And for most of our students, the exposure they're having is via media reports, which to a certain extent we can monitor and control. Now, the reason why it's important for us to be able to estimate the impact of a given traumatic event is that we want to know, we want to make certain that our response is proportional to need. While we don't want to underreact and have needs go unmet, we also don't want to overreact, especially at the elementary school level, when adults overreact, behave as if an event is highly traumatic, when in fact it is not. Threat perceptions, student threat perceptions will be increased. As illustrated in this slide, the PREPARE model suggests schools have 4 different response levels. The chosen level is based upon the event itself, its interaction with the number of school community members affected, as well as available resources. The minimal level basically involves us responding without leaving traditional roles. The building level is where we put aside our traditional roles. For a school psychologist like me, that means no counseling sessions. I'm going to cancel the IEPs and the SSTs, and no testing, no psychoeducational evals on that particular day. My entire job is school crisis intervention. District level is reserved for those circumstances where even when we clear our calendars, local school building resources are not enough. And the regional level response is the mass disaster. And that's when, even when all district resources are combined, they just simply are not sufficient. Now, the effect of a crisis and event on an individual is illustrated on this slide. As you can see, it begins with a crisis occurring. You have to have the threat perception there. It has to be viewed as either causing or having the potential to cause pain of some sort. And then coping failure. No immediate coping strategy is available for the individual. That leads to crisis reactions as the individual strives to find a way to cope with it. As you can see, crisis intervention is applied to individuals who have difficulty solving crisis problems and is designed to help them to do so in healthy ways and to avoid maladaptive coping. Now, to the extent a student develops adaptive healthy coping, there's a potential for something known as post-traumatic growth. In other words, it can be conceptualized as a teachable moment, an opportunity to develop new pro-social skills and abilities that will serve the child and the adult, for that matter, as they move through life. Now, our default assumption here is recovery. We do expect individuals, we do expect school communities exposed to these stressful events to recover. But it is important to note that mental illness is a possibility. That said, however, during and immediately after exposure to a stressor like COVID-19, we can, and actually, I would argue we should expect to see some symptoms of mental illness. However, they should be temporary. And it's only when these symptoms do not lessen with time that we are dealing with mental illness. In addition to mental health challenges, I think we also need to anticipate, and I would bet you many of us right now in our virtual classrooms are seeing school adjustment difficulties. Here again, it's important to note that our default assumption is recovery. And especially as we can begin to establish quote unquote normal routines. And in particular, as the threat generated by a stressor dissipates, we can and should expect these challenges to lessen. Of course, there may be some instances wherein mental health and school adjustment difficulties are more durable, and such would signal the need for intervention from a school-employed mental health professional. Consistent with US Department of Education guidelines, the PREPARE model conceptualizes crisis preparedness as being a year-round activity. The brackets found on this slide with WS1 and WS2 illustrate which of the 5 mission areas that the PREPARE curriculum addresses. This slide makes the point that the curriculum also advocates for use of the National Incident Management System, something in California that you may have heard of as referred to as the Standardized Emergency Management System, and its Incident Command System. We advocate for its use when structuring all crisis preparedness efforts. The operations section is where most mental health crisis intervention responders would be placed. And note that for the school crisis intervention, the model recommends including a mental health officer as part of the incident command staff. And this is based on our observation that mental health intervention, mental health crisis intervention, is an essential aspect of the school crisis response. Alrighty, PREPARE is an acronym, and this slide speaks to or spells out exactly what the acronym stands for. P is for prevent, R for reaffirm, E for evaluate, the PAR is provide and respond, and the final E is for examine. In the slides that follow, I will be offering a bit more detail regarding each of these elements. Now, most of what is represented by the P for prevent and prepare for psychological trauma is accomplished outside of the context of a particular crisis event. However, these last two items, promoting student resiliency and minimizing crisis exposure, are things that we can actually do within the context of a stressor like COVID-19. For example, even in the distance learning environment, we can and we should continue to be providing social emotional learning curriculum to our students, and in doing so facilitate the development of problem solving and coping skills that will serve them well as they deal with difficult events. Also, we can minimize crisis exposure. Now, beyond making certain that our students have access to facts, crisis or COVID-19 related facts that allow them to predict and control the event to a certain extent, we don't want our kiddos being bombarded with intense media images related to the crisis. Especially for our little ones, this may begin to skew their threat perceptions, and they may view the event as more dangerous than it is objectively, and that, of course, would increase the potential for psychological trauma. The next element of the acronym is R for reaffirm, and here we're talking about reaffirming both physical and psychological safety. This first slide here is speaking to physical safety. In terms of reinforcing safety in the brick and mortar school building, we need to be able to evacuate, lock down, and reunify students with their caregivers. We also need to account for special needs youth. And we need to be prepared to manage the acute reactions that can make a bad situation even worse. And in general, we need to ensure that all basic needs are met. Schools these days, I think, are doing a real good job of that as we're continuing to provide meals to our students who need that. In terms of the psychological aspect of the R of the PREPARE acronym, we need to make sure that during a crisis, student threat perceptions are proportional to the actual degree of danger. And that after a crisis is over, students are not only objectively safe, but they believe that the danger has passed. Now, key things we need to consider here include, first, and arguably most importantly, monitoring adult reactions. This is especially important both during and following the event. We don't want our kiddos exposed to adults who have, say, for example, lost emotional control related to the stressful event. We've already talked about minimizing exposure. Number 3, making sure there are connections to significant others can be a challenge during times of distance learning. But to the extent we can make use of technology to do so, that's going to be awesome. Number 5 speaks to the importance of routine and ritual. To the extent we can approximate normal rituals and routines, for example, via distance learning opportunities, we are going to facilitate that. And finally, taking some action, doing something, arguably pretty much anything, can help the individual to view the event as more controllable. All righty, I think we have reached a point where y'all have been sitting long enough. So I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to mute myself, but just for 5 minutes. So check your clocks. And in 4 minutes, I'll turn the camera on and I'll unmute myself and I'll give you a brief warning, but now's a chance to stand up, stretch, get a snack, and please take your eyes off the screen. I'll be back with you in 5 minutes. right, everybody, we're going to get back in just over or under a minute. So hopefully you've taken your eyes off the screen, got some water, a healthy snack, and we're going to resume in just a few seconds. I'll give everybody a chance to regroup, sit down, and relax. Speaking of self-care, it is, at least here in Northern California, a gorgeous day outside, and I do hope that when we're done, you can all do what I'm hoping to do, which is go out for some exercise. I'm going to try to go for a run. We'll see how my old legs do, but that would be good to do. Alrighty, well, we are back. And I am going to continue on with our quick review of the PREPARE model. Now, within the PREPARE model, it is noted that when it comes to responding to student needs, one size does not fit all. Consequently, the model has an approach to what we call psychological triage, or the evaluation, that's the E, the evaluation of psychological trauma. This is important now as we're dealing with an ongoing stressor, and it will be important in the future when the stressor terminates and we begin to return to the brick and mortar school buildings. The evaluation begins by looking first at the event variables, which we've already talked about, and an appreciation that some events are more traumatic than others. The event variables tell us how vigilant we need to be when it comes to looking for kids who view the event as threatening. Now, threat perceptions to a large extent are influenced by the individual's experience, their exposure, and their pre-existing vulnerabilities. Finally, the model requires that we look at how the individual is actually reacting to the event, or their crisis reactions. Here we note that while initially most reactions are common, typical, arguably adaptive to a certain extent, to the extent they don't go away, they become more signs of mental illness or psychopathology. In other words, the PREPARE model of psychological triage, or how we suggest going about figuring out who needs what, is to consider both the event, the individual's experience of the event, and how the event is affecting them. This particular slide operationalizes how we use the variables represented within the PREPARE triage model to classify people into different risk categories. So what we've done here is operationalize in terms of low, moderate, and high risk, how the different variables taught within the PREPARE model of triage would be applied. Now, from the evaluation of psychological trauma risks, the PREPARE model suggests making use of one or more of three general classifications of mental health crisis intervention: social support, psychological intervention, psychological education, and psychological intervention. They are offered on a continuum from the most immediate, most natural, least restrictive interventions to the latter, more intense, more professionally oriented, more restrictive mental health crisis interventions. Now, I'm going to be talking about these interventions in a bit more detail in just a second. And also, later on, I hope to have some time to talk about its application to COVID-19. But first, I have a couple of slides that I'm going to review real quickly that make some linkages between all of the different elements of the PREPARE model. This first flow chart and list offers the sequence of events that occurs from that takes place following an event, moving on through reaffirming health, welfare, perceptions of safety and security, evaluating trauma risk, and then based upon assessed risk level, providing specific prepare mental health crisis interventions. And this slide illustrates that the prepare model of mental health crisis intervention is conceptualized as being offered along a multi-tiered system of support. An important point we're trying to illustrate here is that we do not want to interject ourselves into a caregiving equation too assertively. If a student has the internal and/or naturally occurring external resources to more or less independently cope with the crisis, we want to allow them to do so. Reflect, if you will, on what might happen if we provide direct intervention to a student who does not need it. We might interfere with post-traumatic growth, the appreciation for the skill sets that they already have. Although this is a crude analogy, think about what happens when we offer special education to a student who really doesn't need it. Now, within the model, the primary mental health intervention is social support. While the 4 strategies on this slide are all conceptualized as being universal or tier 1 interventions, they are presented sequentially along a continuum from the most immediate or natural to the most restrictive or professionally oriented. Moving along our multi-tiered system of support, the next general class of interventions within the prepare model is referred to as psychological education. We view these as being a necessary element of interventions because sometimes simply reconnecting students with their support systems just isn't enough. And sometimes the support systems and students themselves need a little bit of direct instruction on what they can do to cope with a difficult event. The first 3 strategies on this list are still tier 1 interventions. They're considered universal, with the last being the first of our tier 2 or selected interventions. The 4th intervention, the student psychoeducational group, is the first tier 2 intervention, which, by the way, has been manualized. Within the curriculum, we have a big fat manual for delivering these groups at different levels across the K-12 curriculum. And we've offered this because as a tier 2 intervention, because it's here that we think we're more likely than not to find them being provided by a school employed mental health professional. In other words, this is the first of what we might view as a direct service, whereas all of the other tier 1 interventions offered by the school employed mental health professional are consultative or an indirect service in nature. Again, a continuum from least to most restrictive. The 3rd general set of strategies are the psychological interventions. And here the model acknowledges that while natural recovery is an expectation, there will be some students and staff members who need more professionally oriented and direct support to cope with crisis-generated problems. The first 3 strategies are categorized as being selected or tier 2 interventions. And again, they are represented along a continuum from least to most restrictive interventions. The first 3 items on this list are directly taught within the curriculum. There's opportunities to practice, and we do purport to develop skills in stabilization, group, and individual crisis intervention. The latter 2 are introduced. We do not, however, purport to teach individuals skills for psychological recovery or specific psychotherapeutic treatment approaches. And finally, there is no such thing as a perfect mental health crisis intervention. Every event has its own unique features, which might not have been accounted for. This is not to say, however, that some schools are not better prepared to respond to challenges like the COVID-19 than are others. And with that in mind, the prepare model also includes recognition of the need to examine the effectiveness of the response. Recommended elements of such include needs and vulnerability assessments, which take place before an event occurs, process analyses, which take place during a crisis, as we kind of tweak in real time the interventions that we're offering, And finally, they include after-action reports and outcome evaluations, wherein we capture the lessons that we learned by a given crisis event. Okay, just quickly checking my time here. I know that we wanted to get to questions around 2:45, so I will do my best to stick to that timeline. I do now, however, in the time left to me, speak more specifically about the application of the PREPARE model to the COVID-19 stressor. First, I think it's important to acknowledge that stress is a normal part of the human experience. And for the most part, for most persons who are healthy and surrounded by resilient social supports, they can be expected, stressors like COVID-19, to be tolerable and maybe even potentially positive if we realize some post-traumatic growth from it. For example, personally, I can speak to the fact that COVID-19 stress for me has been positive to the extent it's promoted health maintaining behaviors. The stress does remind me I need to wash my hands. It does remind me that I need to wear my mask when I go outside. It does remind me to maintain physical distance from friends who I might otherwise be running up to give a big old hug. Now, this is not to say that adults should not strive to help children cope with stress and to teach them how to regulate the stress response mechanism. And really, that's what we're trying to get at with this slide. So you can see the stressor here is COVID-19. To the extent it's perceived of as threatening, the stress response might begin to be activated. We may have some fight or flight things going on. Eventually, the body should return to baseline as the stress response is activated. The PREPARE model would be applicable both right now as the stress response is being appropriately activated and down the road when we return to school and we essentially need to help kids turn it off and return more or less to baseline, or what's referred to as homeostasis. Now, getting back to the specific elements of the PREPARE acronym and how it directly applies to COVID-19, let's look at the first element, the P for prevent. Also, I do want to remind you that in your supplemental materials, there is a handout titled The PREPARE Model and Global Pandemic, and that is directly tied to these slides that I'm sharing with you now. Okay, so first we want to prevent physical and psychological injury. So we're going to protect youth from harm by ensuring health promoting behaviors, while at the same time minimizing exposure to potentially traumatizing material. That gets back to minimizing media exposure. We're not going to expose you to excessive amounts of media beyond that which is needed to promote and maintain health. Next, reaffirm. We want to reaffirm health and welfare of our youth by ensuring that the youth and their caregivers have crisis backs and are able to take actions that minimize health risks. By the way, I would also point out that giving people these facts should theoretically promote their ability to predict and adaptively respond to a crisis, and that should lessen its traumatic impact. Crises that are more predictable and viewed as more controllable do tend to be less traumatic. Giving youth concrete actions that they can take to maintain health will help them to view the event as more controllable. Again, remember that levels of stress promoting adaptive behavior like hand washing is appropriate. However, we must strive to ensure that threat perceptions and resulting stress reactions are proportional to degree of health risk. Realizing this goal will involve monitoring adult reactions and minimizing control to those who have lost emotional control. This, by the way, is critically important for our primary grade students. Primary grades and below. Individuals 8 years of age and younger typically determine how dangerous a threatening situation is by looking at the reactions of adult caregivers. And to the extent that adult caregivers are overreacting, to the extent that adult caregivers have lost emotional control related to COVID-19, young kids in particular, are going to begin to view the event as more threatening than it actually is. All right. There we go. Evaluate. Okay, so the E in the PREPARE acronym stands for evaluate. And here during COVID-19, we're going to want to evaluate and monitor stress reactions. Extreme reactions will compromise the immune system. It will make the individual more vulnerable to COVID-19. Thus, we need to monitor reactions and, as indicated, intervene to help school students as well as school staff members manage their stress reactions. Now, COVID-19 specific risk factors for more extreme reactions. And these are things we're going to want to attend to now as the situation is unfolding, and later once we are able to return to some approximation of a normal school. These risk factors include getting sick yourself. Any student who actually, or adult staff member who's actually acquired COVID-19, especially if it resulted in them being hospitalized. I think you've probably seen on the media people speaking to that. It sounds like psychologically, it's a very threatening, psychologically speaking, disease, and it can just really wreak havoc with your psyche. So anybody who's been sick, I'm going to be worried about. Anyone who's a loved one has been sick, or who has been a member of a high-risk group, also are individuals who I'm going to want to pay particular attention to. Individuals with pre-existing health problems. This includes physical as well as mental health problems. Obviously, the physical health problem, some of these will increase vulnerability to COVID-19. They are appropriately more stressed about getting it, but again, stress to a certain point is adaptive, and then it becomes counterproductive. So anybody with a pre-existing physical health problem, we're going to want to monitor. Same is true for mental health. While, as I suggested earlier, the default assumption is recovery, an exception to that rule is the individual who has pre-existing mental illness. So trauma exposure, the one-off trauma event, for the otherwise healthy and resilient individual is not likely to generate serious and long-term mental health challenges. But if your baseline health was compromised to begin with, the added stressor of, in this case, COVID-19 may cause some really significant problems. So those kiddos that before COVID-19 we were attending to because of mental illness and mental health challenges, we're going to want to continue to do so. By the way, speaking of mental illness among our nation's school children, I do think it's really important. And this is one of the reasons why when I started off this talk, I made sure to acknowledge Monica and CDE for their attention to school mental health. Because the objective fact is right now we're doing as a society, we're doing a really poor job of addressing mental illness in general, let alone mental illness among our nation's youth. Current federal surveillance estimates suggest that as many as 1 in 5 or 20% of our nation's school children right now, right at this very moment, are dealing with a mental health challenge of some sort. Of that 20% that are mentally ill, dealing with a mental health challenge of some sort, most of them are getting no care, no treatment, no services whatsoever. Most of them are left on their own to deal more or less independently with the mental health challenge. Of those kiddos that get something, the 20% who get some care or treatment, most of those kiddos get it because of, well, look at the participant list and you'll see a lot of educators on that list because of schools. A study done in the American Journal of Psychiatry documented that of the kids that gets to the psychiatrist office, that get to mental health somehow, some way, the vast majority of them get it because of an educator. Someone like all of you who recognized a kid in school struggling and either provided treatment themselves or made appropriate referrals. And the last risk factor that I want to mention, which of course is being exacerbated by the physical distancing requirements of COVID-19, is isolation and a lack of social support. For those kids that were socially isolated to begin with, COVID-19 very well could be making a bad situation worse. And even for those kids that weren't socially isolated, physical distancing requirements may be creating a more stressful situation for them. All right, moving on in the model. Oh, just a couple more notes about the E for evaluate. As we manage COVID-19 related stress, while we can expect this will be tolerable for most of us, we need to acknowledge that there will be some risk. And here, I just really want us to acknowledge and recognize that the inequities that exist in our society, health disparities, for example, are in fact creating some school communities that are more vulnerable to COVID-19 stress than others. And so while by and large, the prepared model talks about, when we do psychological triage, looking at individual students, how they experience the event, and their individual reactions, I do think at the macro level, we do need to appreciate that some of our school communities are particularly impacted by health disparities, and we can and should expect that they're going to be more significantly impacted by COVID-19 stress. Okay, moving on into providing and responding to mental health needs. So these are now the mental health crisis interventions. While face-to-face intervention is oftentimes difficult due to social or physical distancing requirements, there are other options for supporting adaptive coping with this ongoing stressor. And from the 3 general groupings of prepare crisis interventions, the following slides offer some suggestions. First, promote social support systems. Now, for our youngest kiddos, the primary caregivers are essential. But as we get into later childhood and adolescence, we really need to recognize that our children need to connect with their friends, their teachers, and outside social support networks. Now, earlier we talked about some of the challenges of social media and the need to monitor such among our children and to sometimes get them to put their phones away and turn their computers off. In times of physical distancing, I would respectfully suggest that it might be okay to spend a little bit more time gaming with a friend and connecting with peers around the country virtually, or FaceTiming, or like we are right now, Zooming, especially with our older kiddos, because these social connections, especially when it comes to coping with emotions, they're really important. And we need to validate that, recognize that, and support that particular social support network. In terms of psychological education, there are a plethora of informational bulletins, flyers, and handouts that we can distribute to school staff members, parents, and maybe even students themselves. I would acknowledge that the National Association of School Psychologists, which can be, their webpage is www.nasponline.org, has a plethora of these psychoeducational informational bulletins and flyers. One of the more recent ones that I was involved in helping to get ready for distribution is a parent handout. And this particular handout is written in Hmong. And that's one of the advantages of the www.nasponline.org website, is that these flyers, these handouts, these bulletins are published in many different languages. Another option for psychological education could be caregiver trainings. We can do this both with teachers as well as primary caregivers, including parents. I wouldn't combine these two together. I would have one meeting for teachers and one meeting for parents, but we can provide them with knowledge. The teacher delivering their instruction via distance learning, and the parent who's now spending way more time with their child than they're used to, we can, via caregiver trainings, provide them with the objective information they need to realize their caregiving potential. All right, so this moves us on into psychological intervention. As we move up the PREPARE multi-tiered system of support, we do recognize that some individuals are going to need really direct mental health crisis intervention services. We are, for example, going to need to stabilize and ground persons with extreme stress reactions to make sure they are able to maintain a strong immune system. When social support is lacking and psychological education insufficient, we might consider virtual service delivery options. And one of the opportunities, I think, that many of my colleagues, myself included, is realizing in the COVID-19 environment is being required to and getting a lot better at providing telehealth. We can, and many of us are, providing services remotely. And this can be very helpful. Other things, oh, and this gets back to something I think maybe Monica was mentioning in her opening comments. As we provide a virtual service, we need to continue to remember our mandated reporting requirements and be absolutely sure that we document all of our conversations and our interventions. Okay, the final element is examine, and here we're going to want to keep notes, document the actions taken, reflect on what's going well, what have we learned, what are the opportunities, and what were we challenged by? What can we and should we do better? Should we ever be confronted with a similar circumstance in the future? And to the extent we're really deliberate about documenting what we've done, it's going to really facilitate doing things like writing after action reports. And it will facilitate our emergency operation plans as we move forward into the future. All righty, so I got a few minutes left where we're gonna turn this over to a question and answer period. But before I do that, and to kind of dovetail on things that we started this session out with, I do want to spend some time being really deliberate talking about caring for the caregiver. I do want to acknowledge the importance of self-care, especially given the stress generated by COVID-19. Each and every one of you is critical to our nation's, to our state's youth. And to be able to take care of them, you need to take care of yourselves. And so it's with this reality in mind that I would like to offer the following strategies for taking care of yourself. Number one, develop stress management strategies. I think you got a little peek at one of my strategies when we were coming back from the break. Exercise, especially given its physiological benefits, is probably one of the best stress management strategies you can engage in. But there are tons of others. Yoga, mindfulness. Something that I've gotten really good at is breathing. Breath work can be incredibly powerful. To each his own. Find what works for you, but have really specific and deliberate stress management strategies. Number two, education and training. I would suggest that each and every one of you engaging in this session and the three that preceded it, that's self-care. And what you're doing by, in many cases, having what you knew you should be doing, being validated by so-called experts like myself, is going to lower your stress. You're reassured, you've been validated, you know you're on the right track. That's caring for the caregivers. Also make sure there's enough of you. Now, this is particularly challenging in the current environment. I mean, we're probably looking at some budget shortfalls, and we all know who oftentimes gets cut in these difficult times. But the fact of the matter is, society as a whole, CDE, school districts around the state, heck, around the country, have to a much greater extent recognized the importance of school mental health. and the availability of enough crisis interveners to deal with stressors like this one. Number 4, supervision, conferencing, and appreciation. Having leaders, having leadership for your mental health crisis intervention team that is competent, that is skilled, and can provide appropriate evaluations. Really key. Number 5, conduct training on secondary traumatic stress. My colleague, Dr. Melissa Holland, and I have been doing a lot of that with both CASP and at NASP and with a couple of our graduate students. In fact, we just got a book contract to write a whole book on secondary traumatic stress and caring for the caregiver. Being more informed about that, attending these trainings, attending these workshops will be very helpful. Number 6 on my list, partnerships and consultation. Especially as we appreciate the need to work with traumatized youth, we really need to recognize that as educators, particularly school-employed mental health professionals, need to recognize you are not a 24/7 resource. I get it. Many of you do work long, long hours, including weekends and holidays. But the fact of the matter is you're not paid to do that. You are not a 24/7 resource. Quite simply, schools don't have the structures to deal with the kinds of 24/7 concerns sometimes generated by stressful events. So we absolutely must develop partnerships with community mental health and engage in ongoing consultation with these partners. Make sure we have an employee assistance program. Well, I would, just as with, the default assumption is that most of us will deal with the stress, including these job-related stressors. However, too much of it, and I've seen this among some of the most resilient mental health professionals, good friends and colleagues who've just been doing it too long. And there's a point where it overwhelms your coping resources and you need professional help. So make sure you have employee assistance programs and you can access that help should you need it. Number 8 is a really delicate but really important one. I've mentioned several times during this session about the importance of monitoring adult reactions. Adults who are overwhelmed, really distressed, should not be put in caregiving roles. So your plans, your protocols, your mental health crisis intervention procedures must have procedures in place for how we're going to go about gently, carefully, but assuredly removing from a caregiving role that educator, that mental health crisis intervention team member who really shouldn't be a part of the intervention at a given point in time because of the impact of stress on themselves. One way to address this, and one thing that I really like to do with the teams that I've been a part of and consult with, is striving to make self-awareness of the need to tap out of a given response not just okay or acceptable, but striving to make that self-awareness admirable, something to be appreciated and respected. And in all of my interactions with my friends, my colleagues, my students, anybody who might potentially be put in a caregiving role, to the extent they come to me and say, you know what, I'm kind of stressed right now. Now's not the right time for me to be counseling, especially doing crisis counseling. Not only is that okay and acceptable that they tap out, it's like, wow, good job. I really appreciate and respect that self-awareness. And number 9 kind of circles back to number 1 on the list with stress management plans. In addition to having really specific stress management approaches, just have general plans of everything that you're going to do to take care of yourself so that you are in a position to better respond to student needs. Self-care is an ethical responsibility. For the school-employed mental health professional, not taking care of yourself is arguably unethical practice. So be really deliberate about developing those self-care plans. I promised you this at the outset, a slide that provided more information on the PREPARE acronym. This slide provides a QR code to the Prepare book, which gets into a lot more detail. What I've been sharing with you here today. QR codes are really easy to access, by the way. If you just take your smartphone, focus your camera on the code. If it's an iPhone, a little address will appear on the top of the screen. If it's an Android device, it'll appear on the bottom of the screen. Just click on that. It'll take you right to the web page where you could order the Prepare book. And if you want more about the Prepare curriculum, there's a QR code for that as well. Well, looks like, oh, I'm actually a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, yay for me. We are now ready to take questions. So Jeremiah, or who is this going to? Jeremiah? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Dr. Brock, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. Questions have been coming in, and so we definitely have those for you. If you don't mind, I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Fine.
Put up the link to have people continue to submit those questions. Thank you for the extra 2 minutes. Certainly appreciate it. So if there are any others that have been watching or maybe came a little bit, maybe halfway through, and you still have some questions, for the rest of our time until just after 3 o'clock, we're going to have a live Q&A. So if you have a question for Dr. Brock or for Monica from the CDE, or for Marlon Morgan here at Wellness Together, you could submit that there at bit.ly/SYSS2020, and then just submit that there. It's the best way of a big team kind of behind the scenes going through all those, putting them on a spreadsheet for me. And so I can just begin here with the first one. But before that, all the resources, including these slides, we'll just get these converted to a PDF for everyone. And the resource you mentioned in the presentation, Dr. Brock, is already in there. There's about 6 different PDFs in there, and one of them especially regarding COVID-19 and how do we navigate that.
Yeah, and the others I meant to mention, and I didn't. The others, I think there's 3 others that deal with the suicidal crisis and providing virtual suicide intervention. It addresses comprehensive suicide prevention, and then there's a couple of checklists for preparing for virtual suicide intervention, and then a second one for conducting virtual suicide intervention.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that actually goes along with the first question for you, and that is, will there be, and I kind of know the answer, so I know you're going to be glad to talk about this, but will there be a possibility for online Prepare training? If so, who could they connect with? And it looks like this individual would like to get a few people trained as a train the trainer, also set up training across their district and even beyond.
Well, yeah, as I'm sure you're all aware, Prepare trainings, the Prepare curriculum was designed as a face-to-face in-person delivery model. Those have all been suspended. I have, in fact, it was just so last week, I did modify the Prepare curriculum PowerPoint for online delivery. There should be a message going out to Prepare trainers in the next day or 2, if it's not out today already. Speaking to that, this will be true for both Workshop 1 and Workshop 2. And as long as your school has distance learning requirements, this online curriculum will be available. It's not intended to be a permanent thing, although we're getting some pushback that people would like to continue to have it available, but at least for as long as your school has distance learning or physical distancing requirements, we should have up within days available for people who have been trained in the 3rd edition of Prepare, the PowerPoint. It would be complemented by everything else you've learned to deliver the 3rd edition. For existing 2nd edition trainers, you need to upgrade to the 3rd edition before you can deliver this distance learning option, and maybe that might be motivation for you to do that. All of the training upgrade is available online and is virtual. In terms of training of trainers and getting new people ready to give the 3rd edition, frankly, we just don't see any way we can do that with distance learning requirements. So the core workshops, Workshop 1 and Workshop 2, which I basically just talked a lot about, should be available for a distance learning session within days.
Excellent. Okay, and the best place again for them to go to find that, or
Yeah,
a
that web
listserv?
page that I gave them at my last slide, www.nasponline.org, and then follow the links to prepare. If you just Google NASP and then the word prepare, it will take you right to the prepare webpage.
Great.
And anybody who is a current trainer should be getting an email real soon regarding this option.
Fantastic. And also congrats. I think I speak for many that are excited about the secondary traumatic stress book that you'll be writing, and we'll be eager to see that when it releases.
Yes, yes. My colleague Melissa Holland has done a lot of work in that, and I'm just kind of a tag along in that.
That is great.
Also, we have a couple of graduate students that really been big. Taylor, Oren, and Macy Van Eckert have been really important in that work as well.
That is great. There's quite a few actually from the Wellness Together team, also Sac State's graduates. So we're very biased, but there's great work coming out of Northern California. Stingers up, you got it. This next question is for Monica. Monica, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sharing your camera. And the question for you is, how do we as educators and support staff and those supporting families, how do we balance the amount of checking in with families and students without overwhelming them or upsetting them? And we might see that they're dropping off in their engagement or participation on school-wide communications, especially if their students are at the risk of falling behind even more. How do we hold a healthy tension with that?
That is an excellent question, and it's very difficult. And so I think, first of all, you have to start with good intentions, right? And make your best efforts, not just one effort to contact them once. And also give parents some permission, right, to feel lost, to feel like you're invading their personal space, that you're going into their homes via Zoom or even phone calls. Expect some of that. That's absolutely fine. And also remember that that parents, there's a lot of parents that don't know what Wi-Fi, or as we say in Spanish, el Wi-Fi, I don't know what that is, right? They don't know what hotspots or Chromebooks, Google Docs. Okay, that's me, just kidding. They don't know what this stuff is, right? Zoom. And so give them that space, right? Come from a place of cultural humility and make sure that you acknowledge that the parents are capable. They just don't have the knowledge, right? The technological knowledge. And I think that when you come at them and you're very genuine and you come with good intentions and you let them know, hey, I'm checking in because I care about you. I care about your students. I want to make sure that you're doing good. Is it okay if I call you at this time? I'm going to be calling again and checking in with you in a week or 2 weeks. Do you prefer a Monday? Do you prefer Friday? What's the best time for you? I want to make sure that that you're ready for my call, and I am not going to be asking tons of questions. I just want to make sure that you have what you need to support your students. And I know that sometimes this may be difficult for you. So what can I do to help support you, right? And then also take some time to be self-reflective. How am I approaching this parent? Would I want somebody to approach me the way that I'm approaching them? Or should I change my tone? What is it that I need to improve on? But really coming from that place of cultural humility, acknowledging not only parents' deficits, but our own deficits. And I think that way, there is that balance. I think we're going to find that there are more people who are welcoming and that want that those check-ins. And then, if there's a problem, then try to figure out what that problem is. Is this, I hope I wasn't too pushy. I'm not trying to be too pushy, but I just want to make sure that you have what you need. So that's my question, or my answer to that.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing. This next question actually is directed towards the Wellness Together team. So Marlon, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on. And the question here from this individual is, what tips or strategies do you have for school administrators, school social workers, and other support staff to calm teachers, to support them with their own anxiety and stress from week to week related to the current COVID-19 landscape?
Great question. I think it's important to, first of all, be realistic about where our place is and kind of what our boundaries are as in the workplace, to really offer assistance when it comes to the career piece of things, and make sure that we are supporting the teachers and everything they need to do, getting clear expectations out to them so that they're understanding and feel empowered to do check-ins if and when they need to. Also getting trained if there's additional training that needs to take place. I love Dr. Brock's the idea that he's going to be writing that book on supporting, essentially helping the helpers, supporting the folks that are on the front lines, and supporting all of our students and families. And one specific resource that comes to mind that I would recommend is from UCLA and the RAND Corporation, our friends at USC, and it's statprogram.org, and that is support for teachers affected by trauma. We even had all of our therapists at Wellness Together complete this, even though they're not teachers, and it was great for them because there is obviously secondary trauma involved when you are working with people on the front lines and walking with them through their own trauma. And it's a great reminder. I think it takes a little less than 2 hours. There's 5 modules on just how to recognize, it's free also, and there's 5 modules on just how to recognize when you've been affected by secondary trauma. And again, it's a great resource. It's statprogram.org. So just want to go to that, and you can sign up. Again, it's free, and it's a great resource for teachers, and I think really for therapists or anyone who may be affected by secondary trauma.
Great, thank you, Marlon. It's a good resource. I believe the team will be putting that link in the chat box, so attendees will be able to click on that, statprogram.org. I have a question. It's actually directed towards Dr. Brock, but Monica, in the recent work you've been doing with the statewide crisis response team, I know you could maybe share some helpful things here. But this question, Dr. Brock, if you wouldn't mind leading out, the individual asks, in this current distance learning environment, what would support look like for students and for staff in the event of a student death?
Yeah, it would, I was talking earlier about that, how we would need to employ distance learning and telehealth. I think if you looked at the supplemental materials I put, where I talked about preparing for and then providing virtual suicide intervention, you'll get a sense for what you could do. One thing that we can do in a pretty straightforward way is we can provide lots of psychological education for parents as well as school staff members. We can also, I do have some colleagues in Southern California who are experimenting with the idea of doing student psychoeducation groups via distance learning. I think that has potential as well. Monica, you got other ideas?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can share is that the Student Mental Health Policy Work Group has a suicide prevention committee, and within that committee, Dr. Brock, Marlon, Jeremiah, and a number of other partners are shaping what we initially called the statewide crisis response team, which we had a really big general vision for this, but part of it was to respond to suicides either by student or staff. And so we are now thinking of changing the name so that it could be a little bit more specific to the statewide suicide postvention response team. And what we do is when we learn of a suicide, either through the media or if an LEA contacts us, is that we will schedule a meeting and subsequent follow-up meetings to see what ways we can support the LEAs, because we know this is a highly emotional time for staff and students and families. And so we want to be able to make sure that all of the processes are in place, that they have enough resources, that their communication to the parents, to students and staff is appropriate, and that any communication with the media is handled by one person, one representative from the LEA. And so that's one of the things that we've started already because of COVID, because we've seen more suicides that have been more visible through the media. And so that's what I have to offer to that question.
I would also add that the National Association of School Psychologists has a crisis response team. We do lots of consultation. We're not 24/7. We work 5 days a week, and it's Eastern time zone, which makes it kind of difficult for California. But if you go to the NAS webpage, there is a phone number you can call, contact people, and if a given school district just wanted to bounce some ideas off someone like me, there's a group of us available through NAS that do provide ongoing support.
Great. So this next question, it'd be great for all three of you, but Dr. Bracas was directed to you if you wouldn't mind leading out. And this individual submitted this question, that SEL is more robust at the K-8 level, and it leaves arguably high school students to need it desperately. So it sounds like it's for their context where they're serving students and families. But yet, even though the need is there, the curriculum time prevents this from happening. How can we shift the conversation for whether or not adolescents and how much they need and deserve social emotional learning?
Well, I think it gets back to some of those advocacy messages I was sharing earlier, which I refer to it as, this is my mnemonic, 2020. 20% of our nation's high school youth are mentally ill. Only 20% of them are getting any care or treatment at all. So, oh, and by the way, another valuable research finding that I think supports advocacy for what you're asking for is the fact that when services, mental health services, or any health service for that matter, is provided at school, in a school clinic, treatment compliance increases 21 times. So, those are more responsive in nature, but I guess my point would be, make clear, and by the way, advocacy takes place at all levels. It takes place before Congress, it takes place before the state legislature. It takes place in the grocery store talking to a friend. It takes place in a teacher's lunchroom or in a Zoom meeting like we're having right now. There's all sorts of different opportunities for you to advocate, to make the case that, hey, we got a serious problem. 2020, 20% of our nation's kids are dealing with these challenges. 20% are getting, or only 20% are getting any care. That would be one way I would suggest going about trying to increase availability of social emotional learning at the high school level.
Yeah, I would also just add to that. Thanks, Dr. Brock. The advocacy really is the key. And we have so many great folks, from school counselors to nurses to social workers, psychologists on our campuses who are seeing the need every day. Educators see the need every day. So to organize some meetings around that for your site, to be the champion at your site level, whether or not you go to a site leadership meeting, able to share kind of some qualitative, some examples of needs that you've encountered or themes that you're seeing with your students. I also think it's important, and I never want to say we need to teach school board members anything, because they're very intelligent and helpful people, and we really owe them a lot for the services they provide. But sometimes it's helpful to increase the understanding of school board members when it comes to how we allocate our resources, especially in a time like this when there's bound to be less resources from the economic slowdown that we're seeing. We need to get in and we need to really interface with district personnel, decision makers, and also the school board members, and give them the information they need to make great decisions to take care of our students during this really difficult time.
I would only add, and let me piggyback on what Marlon said, is that yes, it's great to go to your school board. I would recommend that those school board presentations be made by youth themselves, because youth are actually asking for this SEL, right? So not only should they be making presentations to the school board, but also to their administrations, right? To community and to potential funders who can bring some other resources on site. And you know, SEL can be built into MTSS at the universal level, right? We don't need to make this a big thing where we're adding more to the teachers. It's just school-wide, increasing and improving the school climate. You can infuse all kinds of activities that are going to help build that social emotional skills within students. And then there are other extracurricular activities. So for example, the NAMI on campus high school clubs, right, that are being formed throughout the state. These are student-led clubs that they're not support groups. They're there to increase awareness among the students and also the staff about what is mental health and wellness about, and let's start to, you know, decrease the stigma around mental illness, because we all know that people who are living with mental illness can thrive and they can live fulfilling lives. And so those types of groups and those types of activities to inform and increase awareness are very helpful with all of this.
Excellent. Thank you all. I have one more question that's here that I think would be helpful. I'm also going to show my screen in case there are any kind of last minute questions that are coming in. There's still quite a few people that are here with us, and it looks like there's still some interest. And so if you're here with us after 3 p.m., thanks for that bit of an extension. We'll make this the last one unless anything comes through. But if you'd like to access any of the resources for today, again, you can do so in perpetuity there online at bit.ly/supporting you, supporting students. We'd love to know how helpful this has been for you, or how we can make it more helpful, as well as any other ways that California Department of Education and Wellness Together School Mental Health can best support you as you support students. And then again, this is being recorded. This has been recorded, and the previous 3 in this series is on our YouTube channel. Fastest way to get these is to become a subscriber, or you can go to our website, wellnesstogether.org/events. Dr. Brock, if you don't mind leading out with this, and then Marlon, there may be some extra context that you can share for here. But what advice or tips would you give students currently in their school psychology or counseling program in regard to their practicum experience and the COVID-19 effect that it's having on it? As the school psych program coordinator there at Sac State, and Marlon as an alum from the school counseling, I thought both of you might have some helpful things to share, I think, as we're all trying to understand how we navigate these days. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, our counseling practicums are continuing. We're employing telehealth, so it provided us with a really good opportunity to learn how you provide this service via distance learning. Now, for a metropolitan area like ours, that may not seem all that necessary and important, but I do think we need to appreciate we have some pretty remote and rural parts of our state where services, mental health services in particular, are sorely lacking. So to the extent we're developing greater competency to provide counseling practicums via telehealth, I think that's an opportunity. The thing we haven't quite figured out yet would be our assessment practicums. I don't know what we're going to do with that if we start the year with those still, with there still being distance learning requirements. I can tell you that we got far enough into this semester that we were just fine with in terms of the assessment practical experiences our students get. That will be a tricky one if we move forward. But with that exception, my answer is develop your telehealth skills. And NASP Online, by the way, another plug for my national association, has lots of resources regarding providing and delivering telehealth.
That's great. I think if the question also is how to choose a practicum, I mean, I would choose it just like you would normally, and make sure that there are experienced folks at your site who have your PPS credential that can spend time with you, take the time to walk you through what their day looks like, support you as you are providing these services, often for the first time. And in this time, I'd say it might be important to find a site that is employing telehealth practices, knows is really putting some effort toward doing that ethically and with best practices, and that you can learn, because I don't know that this, I mean, in some ways, I think that a lot of this will probably continue. That's my opinion, that there will be some telehealth to continue beyond what we're seeing now, because there are rural areas, and we've even seen times when it's very helpful for us to provide telehealth to school sites in the urban environment. For example, in the Bay Area, we've been able to provide telehealth to sites in the Bay Area where there's not a lot. There's folks that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and then there's folks that are very wealthy, and there's not too many therapists, because therapists don't often fit into either one of those. And so it's important to remember too that telehealth can be important in all those kinds of areas. So yeah, I'd say make sure that it's a place that people are going to be willing to train you, spend the time, have patience, and really walk you through what it's like to do your job as a person with a PPS.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Brock and Monica and Marlon, on addressing the question from attendees. This month would not have happened with about a dozen people behind the scenes, so just a quick shout out to them. Thank you so much. Denise, thank you for providing closed captioning services throughout this month, so that individuals that would find that helpful can participate and still have access to this valuable content for them. Amber, Chantel, Gabe, Cassie, Jacob, David, Melissa, Kelsey, Jillian, and Nicole, a part of the Wellness Together team, helping this month happen. Just so grateful. And also for you as a participant, thank you for being here with us. And I'm a small part, Marlon's a small part of this great team, and we're very grateful for the partnership with California Department of Education. So again, Monica, thank you for your time. Dr. Brock, thanks for going just a few minutes past 3 o'clock here. We certainly appreciate it. And again, here's those 4 important links for you. Finally, again, my name is Jeremiah Aha, Assistant Director here with Wellness Together School Mental Health. Thank you for the work that you continue to do, even in the midst of a worldwide crisis, to support your students and families. Do not forget to take care of the best intervention for those students and families, and that is you. All right, all the best. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.